Joining us from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California, former host of one of my favorite shows back in the day. I am talking about VH1's Bands Reunited. His name is Aamer Haleem. Aamer, what is up, dude? Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Cliff, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. As I was pointing out to you before we started rolling and recording, as we like to say back in the day, and maybe we can still say it today, I'm really digging your lightsaber background.
Well, thank you, man.
It's really cool.
Thank you. Can you appreciate can you see the background as well beside the light? That's the Sunset Strip, man. That's your neck of the woods.
I love it.
Do you like that?
Yeah.
There you
Thank
go,
you.
dude. Yeah, of course, man. Well, yeah, man, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on and talk to me. And so let's start with your background. First of all, man, how did you get involved in television? Talk to me about that.
It was a cold, rainy night. No, I was living in Toronto at the time. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree with no practical purpose. It was history and poli-sci. And then I took a graduate program in journalism. And so what was great, and this is depending on how old your listeners and viewers are, it's like, journalism? What was that? Well, we're going to do a deeper dive and talk about things like newspapers and when they were actually printed on paper, or magazines or radio or television. And those are the options you could take, in terms of, we would learn about all the mediums, but then you could specialize in one or the other, depending on what you preferred. So I chose television. I enjoyed it. And then there's a public access station in the town where I was living, and I volunteered there and started out as a reporter for it was a show on the philosophy was horizontal multiculturalism. And what that means is you lie down next to someone it's basically, it was very smart. The founders of that station, or the channel and show, because it had its own channel for a second, was, when you're integrated into a new society, coming to the US or to Canada, Canada has a very, just like the US, a very vibrant culture made up of other cultures. But we tend to be in our own silos. So the philosophy of this show, which was called Canadian Spectrum, was let's mix as much as we can. And being a visual medium, the producers would be like, okay, you don't look like you're, of Bavarian descent from a traditional standpoint. So you go cover the Oktoberfest event. And then someone who would be, from that background would cover, a Thai event or something to do with someone who's a member of the Thai Canadian community. So I liked the idea of it, and it was really cool. So I did that for a bit, hosted on that show, reported on that show, and then I wandered over into sports, live sports. And then my break came when I was still in school and I was interning at TSN, which is the sports network, Canada's ESPN, as we would say. As a producer, I'd call up, teams and their PR people and say, we're Canada's ESPN. Can we have so-and-so on our show?
Yeah.
And the show I worked for was called Inside Sports. And that was basically those of you who watch Nightline or any type of interview show that's set in the studio but talking to guests on location, kind of like we're doing right now, that was the premise of the show, is that we would do a setup piece for the show for Inside Sports, and then we would have featured guests that our host in studio would talk to.
Cool.
And then it kind of went from there. I eventually, would put a reel together, and instead of the way we can do it now, just basically send out links, I would actually send out physical tapes across the country, thinking I want to be a sportscaster. But there was a network in Hong Kong called Channel V, which was part of Star TV, Satellite Television Asia region. And my cousins recommended that I send it to them, those who were living in Asia at the time, my relatives over in Pakistan in particular, because the network was across Asia, like across, I think, 50 countries, and hundreds of millions of people were watching it. So I sent it to Hong Kong, where the English language version of that channel was based, and was invited to go over and start as a producer and a backup host for this entertainment update show that was going to compete with MTV News. And eventually I became the full-time host and producer on it.
In Hong Kong.
So that was my first break. Yeah, in Hong Kong.
Oh,
When people
wow.
talk about going to like a market in the States, like they'll go, "Oh, I started in Peoria or Idaho, whatever," like a smaller market compared to the Chicago, New York, LA.
Yeah.
My small markets start was in Hong
Well,
Kong.
dude, that had to be pretty cool, right?
It was. I mean, I've
Yeah.
never. I moved to a not only a city, but a part of the planet that I'd never visited, let alone lived in. Like I went sight unseen. And again, we're talking late '90s, so pre-internet, where you could go online and follow people on social media from Hong Kong and get an idea of what life is like over there.
Sure.
This was just kind of like, talking to people who my parents' friends, my own friends who were from there, getting an idea of what it would be like, and then eventually heading over there.
That's cool, man. How long were you in Hong Kong?
Just over a year. I
Okay.
was there for handover. So when the British kindly handed the territory back to the Chinese,
Yeah.
I was there for that, which was a pretty spectacular time to be there. In a moment in history like that. So, yeah, and it was great. It was just like, fly by the seat of your pants. I, to be honest, expected that I'd have to raise my game because I was like, oh, I'm working for the satellite network, and I was hired by another Canadian who recognized where I was at the time, and he brought me over because they were doing live TV for the first time. They hadn't done live broadcast programming; it was all pre-recorded.
Wow.
So he wanted me for my live experience, and when I got there, I thought again, like but it wasn't the case. They were hiring people from little to no experience in TV and just kind of teach. And as you have come to realize, I certainly did then, and a lot of people have. It's not, as some people would say, rocket surgery
Yeah.
or as such. Like it's easy to understand the mechanics of production. Where the skill and the talent comes in is when you can refine it. So yeah, a bunch of us just get together and produce this daily entertainment update show.
That's cool. What year did you graduate college?
That's a good question. It was the early '90s, so it was like the funny thing is, as they said, I jobbed out, meaning I didn't even have to finish my last semester at doing my postgraduate journalism program. I got hired by TSN, so I got a diploma in the mail. So that was like early '90s, maybe '92, something like that. Yeah,
Okay, gotcha. So
yeah.
what'd you do after Hong Kong?
Then it was funny. So I needed to come back to the States or to North America, and I wanted to go to the States with the reel that I built up. A lot of artists came through. Alanis was big at the time. Uh, Hootie and the Blowfish, a band called Bush, like all these bands of that and artists of that era came through and were on our network, and I got to interview a lot of them. So I had a pretty decent reel put together. So I sent it out far and wide to, CNN had a very robust entertainment division at the time. There were other outlets, Entertainment Tonight. And in Canada, we had, again, the Canadian version of MTV was called Much Music.
Yeah.
So I sent it a bunch of places. And to stand out, again, this isn't just sending a link. This is actually putting a physical tape into an envelope
Oh
and
yeah.
having it somehow pop and stand out with the stack of tapes that people would get. I would include a postcard from Hong Kong as my note. I would address it to whoever I needed to address it to, the news director or the executive producer of a show, and I would just write him a quick note and send it to him. And somebody told me that in Vancouver they were starting up a new station, not a show, but an entire station, and would I be interested in? I should maybe throw my hat in the ring there. So I did. I threw my hat in the ring. So they got my tape and everything, and I called them from Hong Kong. When I was done, I was ready to come back, and I had a layover in Vancouver on my way back to Toronto. And I called and I said, "Hey, I just want to make sure that someone got my reel. I'm applying for the entertainment department for the station and all that." And they were just like, "Yeah, yeah, somebody will get back to you." Because I'm sure they were just flooded with phone calls and messages from people trying to get on the station,
Sure.
having their break happen there.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, no one's in my mind. I was like, no one's getting back to me. Like, if I need to accelerate this process, especially since my deadline was the layover. I had the 1 day layover that I could go and meet with people in person. So I called the station was called CTV. I called that CTV Vancouver, and I called the network HR head in Toronto, and I said, hey, I've got a reel and a postcard sitting on someone's desk. Can you just make sure they see it, and if they're interested, that I'm not in Vancouver, I'm in Hong Kong, and no one's going to call me back in Hong Kong. So if you could, if anyone's interested, I'd love to get a hold of them. So she was great. She connected me with the right people. So on a layover, I went back. Went back to Canada, had a layover in Vancouver, went to the station. They were still in an office. They were renovating an entire building, which is at the corner of a pretty prominent intersection in Vancouver. So they were in this bank tower, basically building, office tower, I should say. And I went in, said hi to the executives that I need to say hi to. And they said, hey, can you come back tomorrow for like a camera test? I'm like, okay, but I've got a plane to catch. And they're like, yeah, no problem. We'll work it with your schedule. I said, sure. Went back the next day. They sent me out with a camera operator, camera person, and a producer. Actually, he was a very good producer as well. And we just roamed around the streets of Vancouver. And if you've ever been to Vancouver, they have a corner where there are two Starbucks, made famous in a film called Best in Show about Starbucks being that close to each other. So they're on one on either corner.
Yeah.
So I went to one, had the barista there make a cappuccino or something, and timed him. And then went across the street diagonally to the other Starbucks and said, hey, we're from the new station that's starting up. We just want to see how fast you can make a cappuccino. He's like, oh, no. We're going to have to get corporate approval and all this stuff. And I said, well, your competition, right, i.e. your sister Starbucks across the street just did it in like 35 seconds a day. Oh, really? Then the competitive juices were flowing. Like, yeah, well, let's do it. So anyhow, so we shot all that stuff, man on the street stuff. Went back to the station, and as we were wrapping up, people were sort of looking at what we had shot, the raw material, what we'd shot, and they were gathering around, and they seemed pretty impressed by it. I said, okay, bye. I got to catch a plane. Let me know. I got representation and stuff. You can contact them if you want to move forward.
Yeah.
I got back to the hotel. Again, no cell phone really. I just came back to the continent. But I got a message at the front desk saying, so-and-so wants you to call them. And I said, okay. So basically, again, relying on pay phones,
Yep.
Again, some people are like, were there horses and carriages around? Like, how long ago is this? Late 90s, people.
Yep.
So basically, called this person as my flight was boarding, and they said, we would like to welcome you to Vancouver Television, which was actually the name of the station at the time, VTV, Vancouver Television. I said, cool. Well, I got a plane to catch. Hopefully we'll see you soon, based on the negotiation, all that. But thank you for the offer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's really cool, actually. Did you get any sort of look or interest from Much Music in Canada?
I did.
Yeah.
I did indeed. Yeah. Somebody got back to me and they said, we'd love to come and see you. You can come and talk to us and all that. But I directed them to my reps, and I think maybe that might have been not the best move, because at the time, I don't know if things have changed since then, but you really didn't have representation. You kind of represented yourself, and if there was any legalities and contracts to go through, you'd hire a lawyer per se. There wasn't such a culture of having representation, having agents as such as we do here in the States. So maybe that turned them off. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that never happened. So I just wound up going to Vancouver. And the funny thing was, they didn't want me to do anything with their entertainment department. They wanted me to host their morning show.
Okay.
Which was like, oh, okay. I didn't expect that. I'm a night owl. I'm not a morning person as such. And in fact, when you host a morning show, you're not a morning person. You're a middle of the night person, because you get up at 3:30 in the morning, get ready, go into work. And then our show would start, I think it started at 5:36 and in the morning. And so people think, oh, they just got up themselves. It's like, no. We got up hours ago. We prepped both ourselves and our show to be here. And that was honestly the best experience I could have had. Like, I wish, someone like yourself or anybody who's, relatively new to this had or has an opportunity to do that kind of programming, because you're doing basically, it's like a gift you receive every day, and you open it and it's like you're doing it, something in hard news, like, you're talking to a politician or a newsmaker, you're doing something from sports, you're doing something regarding entertainment. Like, there's so much that you do in those 3 hours. And the set that we had too was amazing, because it was on the concourse level of the station, of the studio. And it was basically, the best way to describe it is Honey, I Shrunk the Host. There was a large breakfast plate. It was very meta. It had a giant egg on it with a beanbag yolk, two toast couches, as we'd call them. And then the plate, the giant breakfast plate, was bordered by like a display table, which was the form of a knife. We also had a fork. We also had a giant juice box, which had housed our monitor, so we could, refer to that from time to time. That eventually got sponsorship from Minute Maid. We also had a giant coffee cup you could hop into. The door would swing open, and then it was
Yeah.
like sort of open from the side, sponsored by Starbucks. And then we had this, I think, was it a 50-foot cereal box that opened up to reveal the kitchen. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the only way you could really read it was from above. So the overhead cameras on the grid could see it beautifully. But when you saw it like we're talking right now,
Yeah.
it just had this flat background. So you were just kind of like, what is that again? Like that was so
Yeah.
then we changed that set around a few years later. But it was so much fun to do because we could, like I said, we had that whole that whole set. The concourse of the building was our playpen, and then the sidewalk and the traffic happening in downtown was also accessible to us too.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun.
That's really cool, man. And it's funny you're talking about, I guess some of the technology back in the day. I graduated from LSU with a mass comm degree, so I have a mass communications degree. I went
Nice.
more of, I guess, the radio route. But yeah, man, it's so funny to look back at that. And I did some TV stuff as well. But yeah, man, VHS tapes and, to get like an air check tape of yourself in radio, you'd put like a cassette tape in there. And, when you'd hit the record button on the microphone, it'd start rolling the tape. It's just wild and bizarre to look back at these days.
Yeah.
It's come so far,
exactly.
man. Yeah, it's wild.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and now you can, you're in a lovely studio. I'm surrounded by books in my private library. Like you can do this stuff from anywhere.
Yeah.
Like that. And that part of it is like, if I was starting out now, I would have a totally different approach to it, as everybody does.
Sure.
Right. Like it's just, it's amazing what you can, like I said, the physical effort of taking this rectangular piece of plastic, i.e. a VHS tape, for those of you who have never seen one or held one, shoving it into a bubble wrap envelope or bubble, envelope, and then sealing it and having some kind of note in there saying, if you like my stuff, please consider me. And the reel itself, a lot of people, who have podcasts and who are very successful on social media may not have even seen what a reel looks like. And it's basically, as you were saying, just cut up snippets of your work put together. And I was laughing because when I was attempting to be a sportscaster initially, I sent out my reel throughout my demo reel throughout the country to various stations throughout Canada. And I got one back, and no joke, Cliff, it was like, there's the bubble wrap envelope. So it was in the mail room, and it was in the, it was in the apartment I was living in, a little mail slot. So it wouldn't even fit in there. So the postal carrier just delivered it. The delivery person just delivered it to the slot beneath my actual, the locked mailbox. So I take it out, and I see, so the bubble wrap envelope is there. The tape is sticking out. So it's been open and it's sticking out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's weird. Like literally a return to sender kind of situation. So I'm like, oh man, did I write something incorrectly? I open it up, I take out the tape. There's a Post-it stuck to the tape. And it says, this is this is a thanks, but no thanks.
Oh, how funny.
And then a letter saying, Dear Aamer Haleem, thank you for your, I think it said, Dear Ms. Haleem, thank you for your efforts or your submission, but we're not interested, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you didn't even look at this. Or if you looked at it, I gave you the very wrong impression. And whoever was in charge of sending it back to me didn't even bother peeling the Post-it off that said, this is a thanks, but no thanks. So I got that whole package back.
That's great.
And I got so worked up that I was going to write this, like take the letter and then, mark it up and send it back to them. And just kind of like in polite terms, an FU to them.
Right.
But a very, very good friend of mine said, do not do that. He said, it's a small business. It's a very, that can come back and really mess you up, especially if you're starting out.
Sure.
People don't forget things like that. They may have forgotten you right now, but this is not what you want to be remembered for. So I said, okay.
That's so funny, man. That's a trip. Yeah, that's hysterical.
Thanks, but no, I should have framed that Post-it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Aamer, let's talk about, I mentioned it at the beginning. Let's talk about VH1's Bands Reunited.
Okay.
Man, I tell you what, it's funny when I introed it, I said back in the day, right? 2004, Aamer, let's call it 20 years, right? 20 years. Does it feel that way?
Cliff, 20 years this summer was when, it might have been actually when we're recording this, was 20 years ago to the date when we set out to go get these bands back together.
Wow, crazy, man. An
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic show, well produced, well shot, well edited. The whole thing was fantastic. But to you, it's crazy to me to even think about it, man. Does it feel like 20 years to you?
No, I'm like, where did those 20 years
Yeah.
go?
Yeah.
What's happened in between? But it's funny though. The one thing that the first thing I'll say about it is starting where we are today, looking back on those 20 years, a month has not gone by when someone hasn't reached out to me to say how much they love the show. And whatever platforms are available, they've contacted me and they've just really expressed how much they enjoyed watching it and continue to find.
Sure.
And I don't know where they're finding it because
It's on YouTube.
it's yeah, it's on YouTube. But what
Yeah.
I mean to say is the way sometimes I get these responses and it's almost like there's a hive mind where everyone goes, I'm going to watch an episode of Bands Reunited
Yeah, it's
today.
so funny.
It the frequency at which I get comments on it and people reaching out to me, it almost seems like not only is it being broadcast on a streaming service or on a network or upload, available on the streaming service, but it's almost like it has its own channel.
Yeah.
Like, and there weren't that many episodes to begin with, so 2 seasons of that show. So, yeah, that's something that I will never forget working on. Not only from the results that we got, and thank you on behalf of everybody who worked so hard to put the shows together.
Yeah.
But also just the times we had behind the scenes in between,
Yeah.
shows and in between bands and all that stuff was a
What,
lot of fun.
yeah. Tell me about it, man. How'd you land the gig?
Well, I mean, I was working with VH1 at the time.
Yeah.
They had this show, and they would always like the my day job was a weekly show called Top 20 Countdown. And then I would also be sent out with, depending on how many other hosts we would work together on red carpet specials. There was a concert show that we once did called Opening Night Live. There were like big events at Wembley. There was the anniversary of Live Aid, which was a big concert, charity concert in the 80s. They did the anniversary show that called Live 8 at Hyde Park. Princess Diana's sons, William and Harry, you might have heard of them, the princes, put on a concert in her honor to commemorate her birthday at Wembley Stadium. So there were various things that I was doing, but they would always try to find something else for me to do too. And this show came about called Bands Reunited. And basically the premises, for anyone who hasn't seen it, we would go out, myself and our production team would go out and find different members of bands that had long since broken up, primarily from the 80s, if I recall. I think that was we were entirely in the 80s. And we would find them individually, go up to them with a big crew of people and ask if they were willing to reunite with their band for a one night only special performance. And sometimes they said yes, sometimes they said no, but them saying no didn't mean the search was over or our pursuit was done. We would basically be very diligent and persistent as well when it came time to doing that. So, yeah, I just think I'd gone out with a camera crew. We did a test run. The production was based here in LA. I was living in New York at the time, and then they said, yeah, the executives of VH1 said, yeah, we want you to host it.
Did you audition? Did you have to audition for it?
Well, that was kind of like the audition, I guess, doing that test tape. I just went to a record store when we had those and kind of went through a bunch of 80s records and stuff like that. But yeah, I generally didn't have to audition for stuff that VH1 was producing. This was originally a third-party production, which means that they had outsourced the main production elements to another production company, and then the executives at the network said, "This is our guy. We want him to host it." So yeah,
cool. So
but I was already at VH1. Sorry to answer your question,
Yeah.
Cliff. I was already at VH1 working for the network when I got this job, got this show.
So when you're at VH1 and you're working for VH1, do you have representation at that point?
Yeah.
You do?
I have representation throughout. Yeah.
Throughout.
Yeah.
Okay. So when VH1 offers you the show, do you automatically just take it? I'm curious as to how that works. Or do you step up to your agent and go, well, you know what? We need to get more money out of this. How does that work, that process?
That process works differently for different hosts. I was on an overall deal, which meant that whatever the network asked me to do, I would do. I remember one time going in and having to do voiceovers for like half a day for a special that we were doing. Like, I guess they didn't like the original how the original voiceover tracks turned out. So I went to do them. And I remember talking to the producer there for that project saying, hey, thanks for doing this. It was kind of last minute. And he goes, hope you and your agent have sorted it all out. And I said, yeah, I'm a company man. So
Yeah.
in that case, but I think if you're work for hire freelancer with a network, then, whatever project comes along becomes, then you can negotiate on that basis. But I mean, the funny thing is about like, it's easy to look back on a show like that and say, man, it was massive at the time. It still resonates with a lot of people. But at the time going into it, I had no idea that what it was going to
Sure.
become, like that this is going to be part of my lasting legacy in broadcasting.
Yeah, sure. So that would have ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, that's really your big break at that point in time, correct? Your big break, I guess?
No, I mean, my
No?
big break was in Hong Kong, getting that opportunity to host the show called Everybody Red Alert, and that led me to other things. I
Yeah.
mean, and then when I was in Vancouver, you could say working for a local network in Canada, then going to a network in America like VH1, part of MTV Networks, was my big break. So it wasn't. It's the thing I'm known most for. It's
Yeah.
the thing that Bands Reunited is definitely the thing I'm known most for. It's also the show that has got me the most attention, not only with viewers, all over the place and literally around the world, but also with a lot of celebrities, both in and out of the music industry, have come up to me numerous times and surprised me a lot of times, saying that they're huge fans of the show. I remember talking to members of Rage Against the Machine on a red carpet, and they were just so ecstatic to talk about the show. I remember interviewing Paul Rudd at Sundance, but when I was working with the Sundance Channel, saying how much he enjoyed the show. So the show has a lot of people that have supported it from various walks of life
Yeah.
over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk to me about the process? So how did it all work, man? How did it all fly? Let's just say, how long did it take to, let's say, shoot a show
Our
or an
original
episode? Yeah.
premise was one band in a week. That
Okay.
was how we were trying to operate. We would go after, whatever the band was. The first band was Berlin, Motels, those bands. It's like find them wherever they are, get the individual members on board. The device we used was their seminal album, the
Yeah.
actual vinyl, and they would sign to acknowledge that they were going to participate in the reunion. But then due to logistics, the way it worked out was if we were planning to go to the UK to get a bunch of UK based bands, then we would, and if they had any members in the States, we would get them first and then go over there. And then just according to, the geography of the UK and actually Europe, I should say, because we bounced over to Germany too, to Berlin to get a drummer for the band ABC. So it required a lot of tremendous planning on behalf of our production team to do that. So yeah, so we would just go out and then um, you know we go to, again, you try not to get somebody at home. That was the goal. You just think of someone, just a crew showing up at your door. You're like, I'm not going to open this door.
Yeah.
But artists are artists, generally speaking. If they're still musicians and they're not doing like a steady 9 to 5 gig or going to an office, they were all working from home. So, well, we would generally knock on a door and have them come out
Yeah.
and then ask them the big questions. So yeah, and there's just some crazy moments. I remember I landed in the UK. One of the bands we were going after was The Alarm, and their bass player Eddie McDonald was a photographer, professional photographer. And we found out, and again, it's not like the internet was brand new, but it was relatively new and not what it is today. I mean, I think we're even talking pre-Google to where Google is today,
Yep.
all of that. Like our researchers and producers were so diligent in finding out where people were and what they were doing.
Yeah.
So as I said, we didn't want to go to people's homes. Thankfully, in this case, Eddie was a photographer and he had an assignment in the sort of workout studio, the class studio in a gym.
Yeah.
He was doing a photo shoot there. So we basically arrive at the gym in London, and I'd just gotten off the plane, so I'm a little jet lagged as well. And we sent our assistant director in because the gym was, key card access. So he was pretending to be a courier, and once the door opened, he was going to open what would be the floodgates for the entire crew to pour in. And to go back to your question of how it was structured, our core team was generally 2 cameras, producers, myself, associate producers, and each band had its own like dedicated producer. So I would, on the road, I would see a different producer who would update me on where we were with the search for this particular artist. So at a magnitude, generally a crew of like 10 or 12, and that was also for effect, right? Because if you and I show up with our iPhones today, it'd be like, okay, wow. But if we show up with an entire crew of people, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
So he was meant to open the door. We were supposed to fly in, go to the studio where he's doing the photo shoot, and then surprise him and ask him if he wanted to participate. Well, the manager of the gym was very, figured out what was going on. I'm not sure exactly how it transpired, but basically she was barring us from going in. So we went, and she was very upset and asking someone to call the police, at the reception desk. Like, she was very upset at what happened. And this was just when she was one-on-one with our crew member. And then we all show up, and she's like, what's going on? And even more overwhelmed. And I was just like, now I'm like, okay, now I got to break up whatever's happening here. So I kind of intervened and said, no, like, this is a good thing. And that became my mantra, actually, handed to me by one of our exec producers, who said, just, if you just keep saying it's a good thing, which it was and is, like, I believed it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. That eventually someone will get over the fact that they were overwhelmed by everything that was happening, and let it sink in terms of what we were actually there for. Because that was the other challenge too, Cliff. I had to not give away why we were there,
right? Because
that was part of the surprise and reveal, right? We had to have the person on camera because we didn't want her to go and spoil the surprise for us. So she said, all right. And I said, listen, so we just want to talk to Eddie for 1 second. I know he's busy. We just want to ask him a quick question. We came all the way from America to do this. Once that's done, obviously he can finish the shoot, do what he needs to do, and then we'll talk to him afterwards. He goes, all right, I'll do it. I have a bad British accent, but I was born there, so maybe I can have some license I can take. So I'll do it, but you just have to stay put. And I'm like, okay, fine. And so she goes in. So she went from being combatant, like obviously defending her gym, from whoever was trying to go inside, to now she's participating in the process. I'm like, oh my God. And I turned to our producer, like my friends like Eddie, I said, dude, we need Maalox or Pepto-Bismol to sponsor this thing, because my stomach is seizing up. I can't take it.
That's great.
The waves of emotions. So he came out, and then I asked him a question. I said, hi, we came out here. I don't mean to interrupt you doing this job right now, your photo shoot, but I just have a question for you. And he said, what is it? And I go, would you be willing to reunite with your band, The Alarm? And he just goes, no. And I'm like, what? Oh, and I try, it's a good thing. Trust me, it's something you're going to really want to do. And then he just goes, okay. And he was just messing with me.
Yeah.
And he goes, all right. And I'm like, what? Oh, okay. And you see that, it's surprise on my face. Like, I'm surprised and I like get the album, and could you sign this? And he's like, sure. He goes, now I've got to go do my job. I'm like, yeah. So he went off and did his job. And again, I'm like, oh my God, I can't take this. I can't take this emotional roller coaster. It's too much.
So great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Aamer, any idea what the budget was for those shows?
Oh, no, I have no idea. I had nothing to do with the production management side of it. I mean, I knew the people there, but I had no idea what the per episode cost was and the overall budget. It wasn't, I'm laughing because I'm like, it wasn't inexpensive. That's for sure. Taking all of us around.
Yep.
It also is funny that sometimes when there were times we got a couple of artists, just as they were having dinner. I remember we got one artist before they went on stage to do their show, because they were still performing. And then we said, well, let us buy you dinner. And then dinner turned out to be, and again, I don't know specifics in terms of what the numbers were, but I was like, the way the producers are reacting, they're like, oh my God, tack on another zero to this one, because they all they see is VH1's paying for this, not Bands Reunited, this show with its limited budget. They think the entire network is footing the bill. So yeah. I remember that night I was lucky to have some peach cobbler, which I was happy to have in Florida. So that was good.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
But
you mentioned it.
that
Yeah,
was the most extravagant.
yeah.
Sorry, Cliff.
That's funny. Oh no, I was just saying, you're talking about the production crew, and when you guys go overseas for sure. I mean, you guys have a full production crew.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of looking at this, going, man, I wonder what the budget is behind this show. And I'm guessing you guys are staying over for what, a night or two or three, or how did that work?
Oh no, a month. Like when we were in London, we got these executive apartments or whatever, like the fully with the amenities and the kitchen and the bedroom. Basically what you might get with an Airbnb these days, but those executive apartments you can rent for long stays. So we housed our crew in that and in those types of made those types of arrangements for our crew, and we would be there for like a month, and then
Oh
we had a
wow.
full production office set up as well, because not only are we getting the bands, like getting the individual members of the bands back together, but then we're also putting them on stage and then doing the concerts
Sure.
and all of that. It was crazy. And then again, with a very limited notice, these fans would show up, like not like today with you could tweet out or put on Instagram or whatever threads, as
Yeah.
we now know. You could put out messages saying, hey, the Alarm are getting back on stage at this venue, first come first serve kind of thing, or RSVP for tickets.
Yeah.
Back then, I mean, again, our production staff was amazing at getting the word out, and all those gigs were just completely sold out. And um yeah, I remember people would come from out of town. You could see that they brought their suitcases with them because they just last second notice,
Yeah.
didn't even get a hotel, and they just would go on stage, and it was great. I
Yeah.
remember there's so many stories that are popping in my head now, Cliff. Like it's almost like I used the word floodgates earlier. Like I remember one time one of our team was taking a black cab to the venue where Haircut 100 was performing, and he was like, "Oh, what's going on?" And she's like, "Oh," you also had to kind of keep that under wraps too, right? Because you didn't know until the end of the episode, towards the end of the episode, whether the reunion was going to happen, which
Right.
was when we would get them all in the same room, talk about the good old days, and then also, get into some pretty serious stuff like, why did you break up? What happened? And then hand the floor over to them. They had to rehearse,
Yeah.
learn their music again, and then get on stage for that, again, one night only performance.
Sure.
So Haircut 100 was performing, and this one of our team took a cab to the venue, and he was like, "Oh, where are you going? What's going on?" She goes, "Oh, it's just I'm with VH1. We're doing the show." And he's like, "Oh, what band's on stage?" She goes, "Well, you can't really say, but just on the down low, Haircut 100." And dramatically, it's almost like he screeched to a stop, and he said, "I only have one CD in this car." Again, back in the day when you had CDs in cars.
Yeah.
And he holds up their album, and he says, my favorite band. She goes, "Well, guess what? They're on stage." So he parked his car and he got her into the show.
It's wild.
It's just, yeah, it was like winning the lottery for him as far as his favorite band was concerned,
That's so
thinking
cool,
they'd
man.
never get back together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. I mean, as talent, and as you being the host, I'm curious about this process. So let's say, let's go back to maybe the first one or two or three shows, whatever it may be. You guys
Mm.
shoot a show, it's edited, it's done. How does that work for you as talent? Do you go into an office with VH1 execs or producers and sit there and watch it and critique yourself
Oh,
and change things from show to show? Or, hey, you could do this different, y'all could do that different. Did any
yeah.
of that take place along the way?
Yeah. I mean, not as defined as you made it out to be, that there's a meeting and then we look through an episode. I mean, we didn't have this, like we had to turn out these episodes. I mean, we were making them, they were also being post produced, because we started shooting, as I mentioned, 20 years ago in the summer of '03, but then it went into the fall, which is when we went to the UK. So that wasn't much turnaround time, because we were debuting all the episodes over 2 weeks in January, if I recall, of '04.
Yeah.
So we had to just, be constantly shooting and then turning them out. So I would occasionally get notes. I would ask my producers what they thought of whatever interview, or, you know, uh, when we would go get someone, we'd refer to it as an ambush. It's an unfortunate title or label, but it just kind of described how we would go up to someone unannounced and ask them to be a part of our show. Um, so yeah, I mean, I get notes back depending on what level of executive and how
Yeah.
frequently I'd contact or I would be talking to them about little things here and there, but nothing,
Yeah.
We had the format down. We
Sure.
knew what it was going to be. And yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't like we had time to sort of watch them back. I think I watched them the first time
Yeah.
like everybody else did when they were on the air. And it's just, again, these memories that are coming back. I remember my dad calling me and saying something to the effect of, we just watched the Flock of Seagulls episode
Yeah.
and we're going to watch Kajagoogoo. And I'm like, when I was listening to A Flock of Seagulls and Kajagoogoo in my room, when I was living at home, he didn't know who they were. But
Sure.
now to have him just kind of saying it casually because he's
great.
watching his kid host his show, getting those bands back together again, it was just phenomenal.
That's
it was amazing.
Cool, man. Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
How do you think you did as a host?
I mean, you probably have the same would have the same response to this question if I asked it to you. You're always critiquing a few things here and there, would do differently.
Yeah.
But overall, I was happy with it. I mean, the thing I've always wanted to do is what you're doing right now is like an interview show, whether it was broadcast or on radio. And I've done variations of that. But that was my idea to do, my goal was to do a talk show, a late night talk show. If I was able to pull that off one day, I grew up watching Carson at the end of his career, Letterman, all these guys. They were just, I loved those types of shows. So what I liked about this was like a talk show, but it was a traveling talk show.
Right.
You didn't come to the studio came to you.
Yeah.
And it was done on the fly. And then, because after we did the initial like surprise moment and got them to agree to doing, the reunion or being part of the reunion, then I would sit down with that person, that artist, one-on-one,
Sure,
and talk to them about their time with the band and everything else. So that's what I mean by it was like a traveling talk show. And then ultimately, like I said, we get the individual members in the same room.
Yep.
And now you're interviewing 4 or 5 people at once. And, that's has its own challenges in and of itself. So actually, it wasn't just the traveling talk show. It's like, it was a traveling talk show and then a studio talk show all rolled into one.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. You can comment on, I'm going to tell you 3 of my favorite episodes and you can just say whatever you would like about them. But that would be Kajagoogoo. That was a fantastic episode. Information Society. And I really like A Flock of Seagulls too. Yeah. Information Society was interesting, man. That was, that was kind of rough, right? I mean, you guys had to be, for the people watching or listening, that was a band that you guys were not able to get back together. Kurt Harlan originally agreed to do it, then didn't show up, and I'm guessing none of that is staged. Is that pretty much the way that worked? I mean, none of that is staged, right? Yeah.
No, that was the last guy you could get to stage anything. No, there's no way that okay, so let's go with, since we're talking about Information Society, let's start there. I mean, the other members agreed. Yeah. The 3 members agreed to be a part of it. 4 technically, but 3 showed up. Yeah. And they were all, I mean, even like they were all really nice to talk to, and really, I don't know why it didn't happen. Like it was always disappointing to me, and to the point where you might think I took it personally when someone didn't want to participate in a reunion, or the reunion didn't happen either in the room or on stage, because that also happened too. Like you had full band reunion in the room, like I think with Frankie Goes to Hollywood, but they wouldn't perform. It's like, okay. And they have since performed, which is interesting. And I've yet to see that. Yeah. But I felt bad that the 3 members, including one of them who was a touring musician, took time from their lives to be there. And then he just ghosted them. Like he stood them up, and fans are coming in to LA to watch a reunion concert. Some from as far as South America. And I was like, disappointed those people as well.
That was Amanda Kramer, I believe, who flew in from, I believe, London.
London, yes.
Yeah, she flew in from London. Yep.
Amanda was touring with Flock of Seagulls, Psychedelic Furs.
Right. Yep.
Very accomplished keyboard player, musician,
absolutely.
Artist, and they took time from their lives and they wouldn't come in. So that was a very, very, very disappointing episode from that standpoint. And again, as much for the fans and especially the band, the other members who did take the time to honor their commitment to being part of the show.
For sure. And dude, he came across as just being pretty defensive and kind of odd, when you were talking to him. I mean, he just came across as being really weird. And so it's kind of, I guess, not surprising, just as the member said that he didn't show up. I mean, it was almost like they were kind of expecting him not to. so they weren't surprised by it. But yeah, I kind of felt bad for Amanda Kramer, who flew in from London to be
Yes.
there and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And not to sound
Yeah.
cool or name drop or anything like that, but she's a buddy of mine actually, and I know Amanda pretty well.
What?
Yeah, yeah, I know Amanda pretty well actually.
No,
Yeah, yeah, she's great.
that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, she's
Oh
really
my
cool.
gosh.
Yep, yeah.
How do you know her?
So how do I know Amanda? So I first met her in Boston. Are you familiar with the band The Church?
Yes, of course I am.
Under the Milky Way. So
Under, yeah.
I'm actually, again, I'm pretty good buddies with Steve Kilby, the lead singer of The Church. So
Awesome.
I went to see The Church in Boston.
Yeah.
The First happened to be playing Boston the same time The Church were. And
Okay.
at that point in time, this was maybe 3-4 years ago, I guess, maybe 5 years ago, Amanda and Steve were kind of dating. So I was meeting Steve at the hotel, and he came walking in because he had just gotten done eating dinner. I was waiting at the hotel for him. And when he came walking in, I was like, that's Amanda Kramer. I was blown away. I was like, oh, wow, he's with Amanda Kramer right now. It's pretty wild because the Furs were also performing in Boston at the same time The Church were, and they were dating.
Awesome.
So I met her from there. And ever since then, man, whenever they've played in Charlotte, she always puts me on the list. Last time she came here, we had coffee, walked around Charlotte for about an hour and a half, just chit-chatted, talked. She's been on my podcast before, and yeah, she's really cool.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's
Oh
awesome.
my gosh. I know she probably won't remember me, but if she does, just say hi for me, please. And I think if I recall correctly, there was some music. We were talking about music that we were listening to at the time. I can't remember which specific artist, and she hadn't heard of them. And I got sent her, it would have been CDs, obviously, back then, to, like, because we were comparing notes. And I said, oh, you got to listen to these. And I hopefully that she got them. Like, we sent them through, VH1 production through her management to her and all that all that. So hopefully she got them. But it was an amazing time talking to her, and there was so much that came from that. She closed a lot of loops for us. If you watch that episode, and this is my ad for a show that's 20 years old, that if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. She closed a lot of loops for us doing that show. That was amazing. Oh my gosh, this is great. You made my day.
That's awesome, man.
That your friends were. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, look, if the show comes back, clearly we have a host ready to go.
There you go, right? Yep, absolutely, man. Yep, no doubt about it. Yeah,
I didn't realize that these bands were also in your wheelhouse too. That's really cool.
Oh, for sure, man. All of them. Yep.
Yeah, because some of the bands over the years, like, again, you look at compliments differently. Like, what I mean by that is there are people who there's no way, based on how old they are, like they were born in the 21st century or close to the the end of the 20th century, that you had no idea who these bands were at the time of their heyday, who loved the show. And to me, that's another endorsement of the quality of the production,
right,
let alone the bands that they were interested in. So yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's really great, man.
The other band you were talking, so you Info, what was the other one? Oh,
Kajagoogoo, which sorry, man, I'm not meaning to laugh, but yeah, man, me and my brother were talking about Kajagoogoo this morning, right, over breakfast.
Okay.
And you look at that band, man, and you can give me your thoughts on this, and it's like you guys are kicking out the hair of the band, the face of the band, the image of the band, the voice of the band. What are you doing? Like, you're kicking out your lead vocalist. It just, when you kind of look back on that, it's like you guys are kicking out the main guy. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, man. I'm sure there's more to the story, but it just doesn't. Like, what are you guys doing, man? You know what I mean? Like,
I remember, so we tried different ways to get the bands, like, to get to these artists again. Sometimes the thing is that if an artist wasn't on tour or still active, as a musician or as a singer, what have you, then we'd have to track them down as, quote, private citizens, right? Like civilians, so to speak. But if they had representation, we would try to go through them. And in one case, their drummer how was he still in the music game? I think he had something to do with venues. What I recall, and again, I need to go back and research my own show, but what I recall was we were at this venue pretending we were staging a concert there, like as VH1 was staging a concert there.
Rented out music instruments or something along those lines.
Something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And when he figured out that this wasn't what it seemed to be as we were portraying it, because that's how we, I think, justified having cameras there, kind of shooting, whatever. I asked him his name, and he gave me the name of another drummer. Like
Yeah.
he said, my name's Steve Gadd or something.
Right. Yeah. 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 Yep. That's great.
In the moment to see him like making something up and lying, trying to
Yeah.
get out of it was hilarious. But of course that worked out and those guys are really great to work with. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Like but here's the thing. So let me ask you this as someone who's watched the show. What would you say was the reason, overall, overarching reason, general reason why a lot of these bands eventually broke up or went their separate ways, like, and based on what information you got from watching the show?
I mean, I guess from what I've seen, it just seems like there's bad blood, unfortunately, between band members, is the way that it came across to me. Maybe going through that, maybe their management wasn't in place and maybe their management wasn't right. I don't know what,
Yeah.
Maybe that had something to do with it as well.
Yeah.
Um,
I wish I had a bell that I could go ding, 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 ding. Because I found, my non-empirical version of it is kind of echoes what you just said, that it came down to management, either non-existent or ineffectual, or having some of the band members kind of work against each other, And when you think back to bands that have lasted, who were of the same era and lasted decades, I mean, U2 probably being at the top of that list, and REM and all them who were, lasted for decades and decades after the 80s when they really made it big, or initially made it big. They had effective management. They had great management.
Sure.
And that was the sort of thing that I came to find that was like, oh, right. So,
Poor management.
I mean, if you're a sports fan, you can identify, like, you can have all the great players on your court, field, what have you, ice. But if you don't have good coaching, good management, essentially, things can fall apart. And
sure.
I think artists, especially because you're living together, you're traveling together, you're in each other's spaces all that time, and then you're enjoying this mercurial success, and you're trying to cope with that on top of dealing with these people. And that's why the Information Society episode I was chuckling a few moments ago when we were talking about it, because do you recall, and I think this made it to the show, where they had this thing called Shields Up, where Kurt would, I think, put on his Walkman headphones and blocking out the band, and then that's when the band would talk about him. And then eventually he figured that out, so then he would put on the headphones and not press play. He would, or pretend to be listening to something, and then the band realized that he was doing that. So then it was more layers, like he was pretending not to listen to something, and they pretended not to know that he wasn't listening.
Pretty childish, man. It's pretty crazy, right?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Can you imagine those are your coworkers.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the people, your coworkers and your family, your work family, traveling the world together.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. Hey, dude, you were successful in talking to, you were very successful in talking to Gary Cherone from Extreme. What did Nuno Bettencourt tell you? Do you remember when you met him up? And I believe it was in Santa Monica.
Yeah, great memory.
Because you guys didn't air that. That didn't make it.
Yeah, because I don't think he signed the release, so that was a flat no. I actually met Nuno after that too. Like, I saw him at a music convention in Anaheim, and I was doing something for VH1 at the time. And who was there? There's somebody else there at the same convention, representing these instruments and all that stuff at their booths and and all that. And they were a huge fan of the show, weren't a part of the show. There's somebody from Jane's Addiction. Anyhow, so we had a nice conversation and we chatted about the show and all that. And then I saw Nuno, and it was so funny because he looked at me, I looked at him. It's almost like I travel with a camera crew.
Yeah.
Like, I part of it's like shirt, pants, everything, wallet, keys, crew, okay, I can go outside now. So I walk up to him and I'm like, no, we're not, they're with me, but this is a different show. And we were joking about that. This isn't Bands Reunited 2, let's get them again, right? So we talked about it, and I think from what I recall, again, this is a 20-year-old conversation that happened for all of 5 minutes, but it seemed like he was like, yeah, maybe we should have done it. I mean, at the time, especially first season, when you didn't know what this thing was and what it was about, and it was easy for us to move around and me not to be recognized. It was easier to do that season, and from that respect, to be anonymous and to drift from city to city and not worry about people, spoiling it that we were in town and what do we, spoiling the surprise before we got to the artist. But when it was a show that hadn't aired yet and you didn't know anything about it, so you were obviously a little reluctant to participate. So I kind of get it now in retrospect, even though, like I said, once I saw a band go through the process, the whole the reunion process, the playing on stage, giving them at the end of the day closure. That's the thing. Again, going back to your friend Amanda and the folks at Information Society, how they drifted apart, how they may not have resolved things. I mean, they could do that in their private time, but at least for their fans, like having that one final concert, in some cases, as the aforementioned Flock of Seagulls did, they continued on to tour for a little bit after the show, having, rekindled their friendship and all that stuff.
Right.
So, I think there was some regret. I think he might have mentioned to me that Gary, someone in Gary's family said to him, you should have done it, like you should have gotten back together. Because there was, that's the thing, like, and reality shows are just basically part of our fabric, right? That's part of our cultural fabric in America and around the world for that matter. But back then, I mean, it was relatively a new format type of programming.
For sure.
And there are the competition shows, and people would kind of cringe at those, and maybe even today they do at the nature of them and how they are. I'm not judging. If you're a fan of those, great, enjoy them. They're for you.
Yeah.
Just like horror films aren't for me, but a lot of people love horror films. But what I'm getting to with our show is that with Bands Reunited, the motivation was just to get you back on stage with your band, get you in the same room, then get you back on stage with your band in front of your fans.
Right.
And like I said, if it brought you closure, it brought you closure. And if it opened up a new chapter, as in the case of Vixen, their music apparently wasn't digitized or available on iTunes and all that, but then was quickly put on that platform, and their sales went up as a band. Like, that's why I said it's a good thing. I believed what I was saying to each of those people.
For sure. Yeah. And it really came across that way, that's what you guys wanted to do, was to get the band back on stage. That seemed like the ultimate goal. And, Kurt Harlan, I know we keep talking about Information Society. Pretty sure he has come out and really, this was years ago, I guess, dissed the show, said it was all about sensationalism, said there was no research that was involved in it, and, all this sort of stuff. But yeah, it is what it is. So anyways.
I say, okay, not to agree with him, but I mean, evidence to the contrary, the other episodes with the other bands that had gotten back together, and the episode with his band where the research was definitely there. I mean, credit to the producers who helped me, credit to myself doing the research. That's one thing that I pride myself in, is that, like yourself, showing up today and reminding me of a lot of things. You've done your homework, and that's the job that you're required to do. So I don't know. I mean, and they could get together on their own, and a lot of bands had and have since then. But and if you have the ability, I mean, we went after New Kids on the Block. That didn't work out for us. That spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen that episode. But it didn't work out for us. But because they had existing management and they did it, by themselves on their own. Great, good for them. It all worked out.
Right.
But we were just. I mean, I'm not going to be naive and say, it's a commercial endeavor. We're putting a show on the air that has advertising. The goal is to get ratings, of course. But the intent of the show, at the heart of it, was to go and get you back on stage with your bandmates once again.
For sure. Why did it come to an end?
That's the I could say multi-million-dollar question that I do not have an answer to, and I get asked all the time, when is it coming back? And like year 15, I think, is a good indication that it's not coming back or whatever. And no one's approached me. People on various social platforms have included VH1. I don't have a relationship with them anymore. I've long since left them, and it was under great terms. There wasn't anything wrong. They've, in fact, have gone through many different changes at the top there. So it was what it was, and is what it is as well. Past and present acknowledged there. But I don't know. I mean, I thought it had multiple seasons. I honestly thought we were going to go. So the second season became a little bit more trickier because now I was known. Now the show was known. So when we were in an airport in New Mexico and I'm talking to someone, my producers are nervous, like, well, what's that person asking you? And I would always say, oh, we're just going out to, do a pilot episode for a new show I'm working on. They'd be like, oh, okay. And my producer said, who is that guy? What was he asking? I go, oh, he's just a guy interested. He was wondering if we're doing other Bands Reunited. I just kind of, budged it and said no. And I go, oh, you know what he does for a living? He goes, no, what? I go, he's a DJ. He's a morning DJ. So hopefully he wasn't going to go on the air and say, hey, I just ran into Aamer Haleem at the airport, and if the member of the band that we were going after happened to be listening, would be like, huh, that's interesting.
That's
I
pretty
used to
funny.
be in the motels. I wonder if they're coming to get me.
Yeah,
And yes, we were
that's pretty
at
funny,
your
man.
job.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
funny, man.
So then I thought, yeah, third season we'd be in Australia. There were plenty of bands that we could have gone after then. At
Yeah.
the time, had not reunited. I honestly thought that's where we were headed, but
Yeah.
it never came back. I never understood the programming decision either, because both seasons aired on consecutive weeks. So what do they call it? A marathon of some kind, some kind of catchy phrase to say a premiere-a-thon where they had all 10 episodes of the first season over 2 weeks. And then by the time we got to the end of the second week of season one,
Yeah.
that's when I was flooded with interview requests. And I remember doing one day of like junket interviews throughout the country, like sitting in my home talking to different radio stations on the phone. We're so excited and asking, well, when are more episodes coming out? I'm like, that's it. They're done. Like, and so I never knew why they didn't stagger it over 10 weeks as opposed to 10 days to build up that momentum. I mean, the Today Show at the time was doing like an 80s retrospective week or whatever that we would have been perfect for.
Yeah.
But by the time our show came out and they were into that week, there was no reason for me to go on and promote something that had already aired. So I honestly, to this day, have no idea why we didn't do another season. I continued to work for them, and I would have been happy to do another season. But I might have asked at the time. I wasn't sure what the answer was, but yeah, it's one of the great mysteries.
Yeah, interesting, man. Tell everybody that's watching or listening what you are up to today.
Talking to you, and then what I've been doing lately is not shifted away from hosting. I'm still available to host weddings, parties, anything. But I'm now writing scripts, and they're generally spec scripts that I'm working on with a couple of different collaborators. Also working on developing a couple of podcast projects, which is, again, something that everybody is able to do, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
The more voices, the merrier. And just consulting here and there on different projects that people are working on. But it's been nice to sort of shift. I miss live TV in terms of all the things that I've done, but I've shifted to just kind of creating a world. You look at a blank screen in front of you and just coming up with an entire different world. So hopefully I've written your future favorite show at a screen near you in sometime soon. So half the battle is writing the thing and writing the things, because I've written a couple of scripts. The next part of that climb is getting them sold and made and out there. So that's where I'm at.
Very cool, man. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything you want to plug before we leave?
Yeah, it's not like I'm on all the platforms, and it's first name, last name at whatever. So Aamer Haleem, if you want to follow me, great. I'm there. I'm scrolling all the time, posting occasionally. So, but yeah, that's how a lot of people find me, to talk about Bands Reunited in particular, or other things about TV and stuff. So yeah.
Cool. Last question, man. Residuals from Bands Reunited, any or none?
I wish.
No.
I wish there were. But again, like I said, it's a show that's got a life of its own, literally, but not through a traditional broadcaster that I know of, and people talked about a tour. Like, what if the bands got together and did a tour? That was talked about. I think my agent had that conversation at the time. Also, compilation albums, whatever, concerts, DVDs, which were big once upon a time, selling those, but none of that came to fruition. Merch would have been awesome too.
Sure.
None of that happened.
Wow, that's unfortunate, man. That was an opportunity for sure. That was an opportunity.
Yeah, one that that could have been capitalized on, literally.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Aamer, thank you so much, man, for taking time out of your day to come on and talk to me, man, and share all your stories. They were fantastic. Best of luck to you the rest of the way, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Clifford. Appreciate it. Nice to be with you.
Thanks, man. Peace.
Thank you. Peace.